Alright, so this is going to be a sort of introductory / analysis of using pivoting in multiple different varieties in the Draft League format. Now, Gen 8 has brought the introduction of one really huge thing to the metagame, and that is pivoting in the form of teleport. Now, teleport is massive, and it makes a huge difference on building and constructing teams, specifically teams that try and grab offensive momentum, and that's particularly because teleport basically functions as a guaranteed slow pivot that has negative priority. And what that means is you'll essentially be able to get a free switch into whatever you want in front of whatever is in front of you, and that can be huge in order to grab offensive momentum. On the 6 mods in front of me are what I believe are the 6 best teleport users in this metagame. Slowbro obviously can sort of be exchanged with Slowking. Blissey can obviously be somewhat exchanged with Chansey. I just didn't want to seem like relatively repetitive there, but generally I think these are the best pivoters. So what makes a good teleport pivoting mon? So I think the biggest thing is that they should be bulky, particularly because you want to be able to still be able to sponge a hit and pivot out. You don't want to be taking 80% and then pivoting, and then all of a sudden you have no way to recover back up and, you know, pivot again. It just sort of becomes a one-time use sort of thing. Not super effective if you want to grab momentum via your defensive mons. The other reason teleport's so important, to clarify this too, is because it allows certain mons to not be as passive anymore by forcing you to hard switch out and making a Pokemon switching in take extra damage. So the idea is, if you're pivoting, say for example the Blissey answer comes out, right? Say a Conkeler comes out that is built to take on this Blissey, or say, you know, a Ghost type comes out that Blissey can't touch because its only offensive move is Seismic Toss. Being able to teleport out into maybe a Scarf knockoff user or something offensive is so huge for some of these mons that were otherwise so considered passive. I remember in Gen 7, I never thought Clef was that big of an issue because, you know, once you sort of get an answer in, it can, you know, any sort of steel type, it forces something else to switch in and take damage. But with teleport now, that's counteracted a bit. So what makes teleport users good, on top of just having natural bulk, which all of these necessarily have, you also want to be able to have recovery, or at least just not take a lot of damage. I've sort of alluded this to a little bit already. So for example, Arcanine is a great candidate, particularly because it usually runs heavy duty boots, so teleporting means it won't be taking hazards damage upon re-entry, which is really nice. Particularly Slowbro and Slowking are the biggest sort of like examples of this. Not only are they able to switch out and they're not like weak to Stealth Rocks or anything, but they have the Regenerator ability, so teleporting out actively still gives you health in return, which is why now sometimes on even really offensive teams you'll see just teleport 3 attacks on Slowbro because it can still stay bulky by getting that HP back with Regenerator and still teleporting for that offensive momentum. Clefable is relatively good, particularly because you can wish teleport with Clefable. That's something you can't do with Blissey due to incompatibility, though Blissey's still good because it pivots out on every physical attacker and can sort of switch out into the breaker that you need to break into. But yeah, Clefable's just really good because it can Wisp Pass. With Magic Guard it doesn't take any hazards damage, so generally it's relatively good in that instance. Porygon 2 is another thing that's really good because it does bait in sort of specific answers that you can counter back against. I would say the other draw between Porygon 2, Slowbro, and truthfully Deoxys Defense, if you want to run this, is the option of Trick Room Teleport, which could be really huge. It allows you to free switch in your Trick Room users, which can allow you to grab offensive momentum right away. You don't have to worry about hard switching your Trick Room user in, being forced to take damage, or letting your Trick Room setter go down before, you know, you getting your Trick Room user in. It also gives you 1 extra turn to Trick Room that would have been used otherwise to sack the person or the mon that was setting up Trick Room in the first place. So a lot of niche cool options for teleport, but the point behind it is either you can draft teleport cores like Clefable and Slowbro, which I've seen to be a very strong teleport core where you can sort of just pivot back and forth, you know, on the dark types that threaten Slowbro, on the grass team, usually specially attacking grass and electric types, you can go into Clefable. Clefable fears sometimes the fires, the steals, the poisons, which Slowbro threatens offensively. Teleport into Slowbro, sort of teleport back and forth, give Slowbro that sort of extra healing momentum, and then, you know, maybe Wish Pass with Clefable if you need to. And this core in general is just, if you're looking for a very bulky sort of draft league team, building around this core, pairing it then with like other pivoters like Mega Scizor or other sort of offensive mons would be really effective. This isn't really a how to draft video, but I do think that some of these work very well in tandem together. I've also additionally seen Arcanine and Slowbro together, Arcanine and Slowking together. So as long as they aren't like exactly equal on roles, like for example, Clefable can be a Spit F mon, Slowbro can be a defensive mon, as long as they're not the exact same role, like I don't think I would ever suggest Clefable plus Blissey, for example, or Porygon 2 plus Blissey, because they very much share qualities with each other. I might suggest, you know, Slowbro plus Arcanine, or Deoxys plus Arcanine, or Clefable plus P2 potentially, since Clefable can switch in on the knockoffs and the fighting moves for Porygon 2, and you know, something like that. So teleport can sort of coexist between two mons. So that's the first option that you can do with it. Second option is teleporting into sort of offensive mons. So I'm going to keep Slowbro and Clefable in the team builder right now because I think those are the two most prominent examples in the metagame. But for example, let's say you're working with Slowbro, right? What comes in on Slowbro? Electric types, grass types, other bulky water types potentially. So let's work with that, right? Maybe dark types. So one good example is Galarian Darmanitan, if it's allowed in whatever league you're participating in. You know, if you're fearing a Tangrowth coming in on Slowbro, you can teleport into Darmanitan. Now all of a sudden your opponent is forced to take a Banded or, you know, Guerrilla Tactics boosted Icicle Crash on something, which is going to inevitably hurt. Or alternatively, Darmanitan, if there is an answer somewhere in the back of your opponent's arsenal, can U-turn and sort of keep up that teleport momentum. So, or that pivoting momentum rather. So another example to pair with Slowbro on a draft league team could be, if you're afraid of grass types, electric types, is one of the Nidokings. I used this in one of my leagues and found it relatively effective, which was Slowbro being able to pivot against, I'll use Tangrowth as another example, Slowbro being able to pivot against Tangrowth or a Magnezone potentially, or something like that, and switching in Nidoking or Nidoqueen to either Sludge Wave the grass type, Earth Power the electric type, whatever you need to do there. If you're afraid of maybe a bulky normal type coming in that handles Slowbro, or a dark type, there's numerous fighting types that exist. For example, Urshifu. If you are able to pick up Urshifu early on in a round, that's another mon that can U-turn and also sort of like threaten out a bulky dark type or a ghost type or something along those lines. So teleporting into Urshifu could be good. So just those strong hitters, really, really strong options. Additionally, Clefable plus Urshifu is another great example. You could do Rapid Strike, or you can do the other one. Rapid Strike it could be sometimes preferable if you want to be dealing with the fire types that switch in on Clefable as well. Additionally, I've seen really strong psychic types be used with Clefable. So for example, Mega Medicham, if you're afraid of certain poison types coming on Clefable, say you have an Amoonguss that is a huge problem, or a Weezing, all of a sudden you have Medicham can come in and just absolutely nuke it once you have gone for teleport, and Medicham can also keep up that pivoting momentum with Baton Pass. So that's another great core example that I've seen. Another one that I've used in the past in a small tournament, in a speed tour actually, was Clefable plus Azelf, which I found really offensively powerful, especially considering Clefable can run, you know, like Life Orb and be offensive as well. So I'm going to show a replay in which the win con for this individual was using teleport to gain end game momentum and clean up using Trick Room. So this is going to be a replay from my good friend Strompfel, aka someone who is sort of in the front office group that I'm also in, BFO, and someone who's a very experienced battler, a very strong battler. So as you can see, he already used teleport with Slowking. As you can see, this is his teleport mon of choice, but as you can also see, he's paired it with other pivoting mons like Rotom and Greninja and Landorus, and Dragapult. So you got 5 pivoting mons here to sort of keep up the momentum. And the hard breaker here is Mega Mawile on the back. So he already did use teleport this one time to sponge a Toxic, make sure nothing else took a Toxic or a Scald, and pivot into Greninja here, which can go for taunt and sort of stop this Empoleon from doing anything, and then he gets out of spikes. So that's sort of how I guess he uses it relatively effectively in the early game to guarantee he gets his spike up, things like that. But in reality, the biggest part of this game, the biggest part of this game, and I'm gonna skip ahead a little bit because not all of this is super useful, is using U-turn here, for example, to get momentum into Mawile, which he just did and force something out. But in particularly, the end game here is he's not worried about maintaining the greatest number of mons. That's not his concern, right? His concern is using pivoting in the early game to get up as many hazards as possible, spikes, stealth rocks, and he does get a couple flinches, but they're not the biggest deal in the world. But he's down in mons, but he's able to use this. There's Lash Out right there, which did a ridiculous amount of damage. He's able to use the pivoting momentum in the end game, as you will see. Right here it's down. It's still 4-4, but he's able to set up the Trick Room here, take the hit with Hawlucha. He doesn't want to be switching in Mawile, and given it's at 9%, and now all of a sudden Mawile can come in, claim something with Play Rough, and it still has 2 turns left to do exactly what it needs to do. But he is actually able to switch out, predicting a Protect here, but it's because Slowking had that Regenerator in the first place. Since Slowking's actually going to get that HP back, you're going to be able to see that Strompfel is actually going to have the option to do it again, but I actually don't think it matters here. But he's able to use it to take out the Hawlucha, and this is just an instance in which Teleport is able to grab someone offensive momentum and, for example, stop the threat of Hawlucha like he did earlier. This is just an example in which Teleport, although it wasn't used that many times this game, U-turn, Teleport was able to threaten things out, and even though he wasn't concerned with the number of mons he had on his team, he was concerned with getting in a position where he had as much hazards that he could slowly sort of threaten things by gaining momentum. So even though he was down in numbers, he had all of the momentum this game because he was the one getting switch initiative the entire time. Cool. So I'm going to be showing a few more replays like that, but let's switch to U-turn here. So U-turn is the method of pivoting that's been around the longest in Pokemon, I believe introduced in Gen 4, which is interesting. I think Volt Switch then in Gen 5, Teleport in Gen 8. Not sure when Baton Pass was introduced, but actually that's probably the earliest of all of them. So why is U-turn important here? So U-turn could be like a fast U-turn user. We're talking about, maybe a U-turn Coco or a U-turn Noivern or a Tornadus, right? So things that are fast, you could just rather than predicting someone to switch, you could just hit U-turn if it gets the kill or something. You go for that. But what I think is most important for getting pivoting momentum, are slow U-turners. And I'm not talking about things that are 20 speed, although why not, right? Is you want mons that are going to, similarly to Teleport, be able to take a hit and then pivot out. So these are all, I think, relatively good at slowly U-turning. I guess Landorus is the exception of a mon that you could run Scarf and, it can be a fast U-turner, but generally if you're running a bulky set, you could run a slow U-turning set. But generally it's the same idea, right? I think Corviknight's a great option, and you could pair that with something like Clefable. That's a pivoting core. Mandibuzz you could be pairing with something like Clefable, Porygon 2, something like that. Scissor you could be, similarly, for grass types that want to switch in on Slowbro, Slowking, you have Scissor that just completely shuts them down, both in practice and in the prep element. Grass types don't usually have the ability to take on Mega Scissor, so they might not even come in the first place. Landorus Therian, additionally something else that could pair well with maybe Blissey, which this sponges on all of the physical attackers and can intimidate them or something. So Good options all around. I will say that these also work very well together. So like Scizor Mandibuzz, Landorus, Corviknight, I believe don't share any weaknesses. Landorus and Mega Scizor is something I talked about in the last sort of conversation we had about just really good cores in general in Draft League. This pivoting ability is part of the reason why they're really good. Uxie is also really niche, particularly because I think it can go for yawn and then U-turn, for example. So make something drowsy, either force it to switch and get U-turn momentum, or U-turn and you know something's going to sleep, so you can go into like a setup sweeper, for example, and set up on the free turn that you get. Additionally, what makes Landorus really good or Uxie really good is you could set up rocks and then U-turn. Really good options there. Incineroar is a slow U-turner. It is also a slow parting shot user. There's not many parting shot users besides Incineroar, Pangoro, and Silvally, and Alolan Persian, but Incineroar is probably the best at it because it's slow and gets that momentum because it can eat a hit and switch into something without taking damage. So Incineroar is another good option in terms of doing these. Similar logic to Arcanine before, where it can wear the heavy-duty boots, not have to worry about switching too much and taking hazards damage. And it can just sort of pivot freely on, say, bulky waters, and then go into like a really offensive electric that can go for Volt Switch or something like that. So a mon that's really good on sort of offensive electric type cores or whatever. Yeah, so now with U-turn, let's move on to our next replay. So this is a replay that utilizes both teleport and U-turn. As you can see, this is a team that literally has drafted 6 pivoting mons, and I don't think I can like echo this enough and say, like, if you want to like pull this off to the maximum ability, there's not like a limit to how many pivoting mons you could put on your team. Like, if they all fit on a draft together, fucking go for it. Like, having the ability to pivot between all 6 of your mons could be fucking gruesome for your opponent to deal with. So let's take a look at this battle of Luke against Nico here, where Luke has all of these mons. As you can see, already is threatening out Sudowoodo on the Venusaur, you know, going for momentum there, and just sort of being able to switch around, pivot around against different mons. As you can see, Moltres is able to go for a Toxic here, go into Clefable, go into Slowbro on this Bolt Strike. Yes, like, as you can see, like, Slowbro is able to take that hit, but because of Regenerator, it's able to sort of sponge it back up, and it won't really matter. And that's also free information for him, because I'm pretty sure he was able to tell that Victini was banded by that damage, but it's not that big of a deal because, you know, he's able to get the health back, so it came at very little cost to Luke. So they're playing around a little bit here with like random things. The pivoting momentum doesn't come in until a little bit later here, but still it comes into play a little bit in this late game. For example, as Clefable is able to heal up on this Sludge Bomb that doesn't end up killing, but then dies to a final Gambit. So as you can see, so here's a perfect example here, right? So Milotic goes for Toxic. Now, instead of hard switching in Rotom-Mow and risking potentially an Ice Beam prediction or getting Toxicked by this Rotom-Mow, Slowbro is able to get Toxicked, which once again doesn't matter that too much to it because it can always teleport Regenerator that HP off that it would have lost with Toxic and get a clean switch into Rotom-Mow here. And since there's no ground type, it can get clean Volt Switches off. And it can really repeat this process consistently because Milotic's going to be taking toxic damage and Slowbro is going to keep healing up every time it switches out. So it's able to get more clean switches, able to U-turn here. You know, Moltres is able to capitalize on the Sunny Day from Venusaur and go for Flamethrower and knock it out. But as you can see, that was a really good exchange. I actually do want to go back and watch that over just to sort of drill that in with here, which is Slowbro has found itself in a position against Milotic. Milotic is already toxic, so he wants to get offensive momentum against Milotic. His only thing that handles Milotic is this Rotom-Mow. So he wants to get it in clean without risking its death from Ice Beam or even from Toxic. You don't want to get any damage on Rotom-Mow at this point because it's already low. So take the Toxic from Slowbro and get back up to 100% because Regenerator will turn that 72 into 100%. and now get a clean switch into Rotom-Mow. Rotom-Mow is also a pivoter. There's no ground types here. It can freely Volt Switch and not have to worry about a potential immunity like Zeraora, which has been knocked out. Go back into Slowbro here, and even though Milotic's going to be able to recover the damage, because Milotic is toxic, that damage is going to rack up. So Slowbro now is posing this threat of always being able to hit Teleport here, and Milotic can't stay in because it's just going to keep taking toxic damage. So either Nico's forced to stay in and let Milotic die to toxic damage, which, you know, Slowbro will never die to toxic damage because it's teleporting out and getting Regenerator back, or Nico has to switch out and allow Luke to get momentum off, which is exactly what happens on this turn, where he says, okay, I don't want to lose Milotic, I want to go into Venusaur and, you know, give up a little bit of momentum, which is ultimately what helps Luke in this series of events. So skip a little bit ahead here, and fucking Sudowoodo, and the same process can repeat here, right? So Slowbro once again is able to so freely go for Teleport because Milotic can't do anything, or he'll switch out into Victini, and that just allows Dragapult to come in and get momentum off. So Teleport is a no-risk play here, and since once again there's no ground type, Rotom can Volt Switch out, go back into Slowbro, all of the health is healed up, and all of a sudden the toxic damage is racking up. Slowbro is taking nothing at all. So once again, Slowbro can Teleport, go back into Rotom-Mow, Volt Switch again, and just sort of keep up this momentum that's not allowing Nico to have any outs at all, because either he's letting Milotic go down, or he's allowing his opponent to gain offensive momentum against him. So this time Nico chooses to go into Victini, says fuck it, and that allows Luke rather to teleport into Dragapult and get a clean hit off. So he does make a prediction that Milotic's going to come in and mispredicts there, which is fine. But because, you know, Slowbro's been able to heal stuff off the generator, that's easily fixable. So this endgame sort of plays out, but you get the point. Luke ends up winning because he was able to grab offensive momentum here, and that was thanks to using Teleport so often with Slowbro. This is a game that I will show. Do I want to show U-turn first or Volt Switch first? Yeah, let's show Volt Switch first. So not much to say about Volt Switch other than I think Volt Switch is the move best used by fast pivoters. So we're talking about Zeraora, Tapu Koko, mostly because it gives them stab and electric types are really fast, and still gives them offense momentum. So these are still good Volt Switchers in general. Rotom is too, but also slow Volt Switch is equally possible with Magnezone and Fortress. The one concern with Volt Switch, which is shut down a little bit, which is that it is shut down a little bit by Volt Absorbers and ground types. So that is the one danger that Teleport and U-turn doesn't have. U-turn is technically the safest because it isn't shut down by anything. It'll always go off assuming that you don't, you know, die that turn. Teleport is only shut down by taunt. So the downside to Volt Switch is that a Volt Absorber or ground type could come in. Similarly to Flip Turn, which I'm not covering in this video because I think it's a little bit too niche to cover, but it works in the exact same way Volt Switch does, where you know, a stab mon will use it and just get initiative off, whether it be fast initiative with something like Keldeo or slow initiative with something like Milotic, I guess, or Vaporeon. But the downside to it is that a water absorb mon could exist. So there's a downside to every pivoting move, with the exception of U-turn. U-turn will always go off. So anyway, Volt momentum is really good. So similarly, let's backtrack a little bit here. We were just talking about Incineroar. Incineroar invites in things like Toxapex, Milotic. It really can't do anything. So if you're U-turning or Parting Shot, you can go into a fast electric type that's powerful, like Zeraora, Koko, Rotom Wash, and just hit Volt Switch again. Volt Switch is also particularly damaging to teams that have a very lackluster ground type or no ground type at all. So if you're in prep and you see the opponent's ground type is, I don't know, Sand Slash, which isn't that good, you can say, okay, I'm pretty confident that Sand Slash isn't coming, or I'm pretty sure my draft nonetheless takes on Sand Slash. So I'll bring Volt Switch, I'll bring Specs Volt Switch and just do a shit ton of damage and get constant momentum. And that'll be good if Sand Slash doesn't come. So a good example of this is this game right here, and I'm going to apologize to my man Galadite in advance, because this is kind of a reckoning of a game, but I think it's a very, very good example of what I'm talking about here, which is Galadite had one ground type on his team, and that ground type was Sandaconda. Now, Jacal, Tapu Pot 2, but I'm going to refer to him as Jacal, looked at this and said, okay, so Sandaconda is the one resistance to Volt Switch, so I can bring a sort of pivoting Rotom set here along with other pivoters like Uxie, Mega Scizor, Landorus, etc. If Sandaconda does come, my Rotom beats it anyway with Hydro Pump, or Landorus is a free switch, Uxie's a free switch. His team handled it anyway, so it made no difference. So if you're especially scared of ground types and you want to be bringing Volt Switch mons, you should draft mons that shut down common ground types. So Landorus Therian is a fantastic partner with any Volt Switcher in general, because you want to be able to threaten certain ground types from coming in the first place. Levitators like Uxie as well. So I will show this. So as you can see, Sandaconda didn't come to this game, so Jacal instantly knows from turn 1, I get a free Volt Switch off and get momentum immediately. He could lead with literally anything here, including Bulu, given that I outspeed it, unless maybe he wasn't Scarf, or maybe Bulu's Scarf, but he can lead with anything. He could lead Rotom here against anything and immediately get momentum off. So that's what he does, and his Galadite goes into Bulu, he's able to Volt Switch into Scizor, and Bulu can't really touch Scizor. Bulu doesn't get HP Fire anymore because Hidden Power doesn't really exist, and also wouldn't even kill, and Scizor's really bulky, and also Bulu's threatened out by a Bullet Punch. There's just a lot of stuff. So all of a sudden Jacal also now knows that, he's not staying in with Bulu, so I'm just going to go for U-turn and get more pivoting momentum, and now go into my Landorus, which also has U-turn, and he knows that Entei isn't going to stay in against this stuff, so he can set up rocks, which is going to make the pivoting game even better here, because now everything that's forced to switch and take U-turn / Volt Switch chip is also going to be taking rocks chip, and Landorus is able to capitalize on Mandibuzz's passivity by just going for U-turn against it anyway, as even though Galadite goes for a defog here, now all of a sudden the cycle is repeat itself. Now all of a sudden Rotom is back again in front of a team with no ground type that can stop the pivoting, in front of a Mon that is 100% going to switch out against it, baiting in a Mon that is walled by Mega Scizor, which can just then continue the U-turn cycle. Now he goes for Toxic here, which I actually think is a pretty smart play. I think I would have gone for U-turn, but Toxic also makes sense in the sense that in the same way that Rocks was making Galadite take extra damage, which is why he rightfully defogged them on that turn, Toxic here from Jacal ensures that if Bulu is going to be the only switch to Rotom, canceling out the leftovers with just more residual damage from Toxic is going to make it so at some point Bulu is going to be so low that Rotom's going to be able to go off even more for free, eventually killing the Bulu as it constantly comes in, and eventually it'll just get whittled down. So this is just a constant process of pivoting back and forth, whittling. Now in this turn, you saw Jacal using Volt Switch for offensive momentum. So he knew that Galadite was not going to U-turn that turn because it would have left Mandibuzz like 20%. So he knew that Roost was the play, or that Galadite would switch out. So in this scenario now, where Galadite stays in, Jacal is able to go into Primarina, which poses a massive threat with Moonblast. So now Slowking comes in, he makes a double to Rotom, and can do a similar pivoting back and forth, same thing. And this is just a very, very effective use of Volt Switch back and forth. So it just, as you can see, as I said before, Bulu is getting chipped down more and more. Finally, rocks are up again. So now at this point, Landorus can go for U-turn, just get rid of the Leech Seed, and Leech Seed doesn't even matter because it can still just constantly get U-turned on to ensure that it's not there anymore. So now all of a sudden Uxie has gone for Yawn, just the example that I was referring to, which is now going to force Galadite to switch out or have to deal with a sleeping Aggron, and now Yuxi can U-turn again. So very, very good strats by Jacal here. I'm just going to sort of let this replay run because I think it's a great example of how pivoting momentum is used. As you could see, just through the course of this game, he's using that slow momentum or switch momentum, where he's forcing Gladite to switch and then getting a free Volt Switch U-turn off for free, to not just bring in other things that do the same thing and pivot more and more, which he is doing to get residual chip on, but he's also bringing these big threats in, like Calm Mind Primarina, and later you'll see Blacephalon, to basically get free setup. So Yuxi's going to do the same thing here by forcing him to switch through the Yawn. Now Inteleon's taken more damage, and all of a sudden Rotom can do its thing again. U-turn's not going to do much, and Bulu's going to be taking all that damage. So as you can see, like I said earlier, even though Volt Switch doesn't do much to Bulu, it's not about the amount of damage it's doing, it's about the residual chips. So it's taken all of this toxic damage, it's taken this rocks damage, it's about to take 12% from hazards, and it's only going to get, or 12% from toxic rather, and it's only going to get worse. And this is just sort of going to run. So I do want to wait until the end because I do think it actually ends relatively quickly. This isn't too long of a game. There is a little bit of, but there's a Chesto-berry. So Heal Bell, here's more instances of just, being able to U-turn, forcing Gladite to switch more and more, able to Volt Switch here. Scissor's able to roost back up, so it's not worried about getting progressively chipped by the hazards. Get the Yawn off, and then this is the turn now where, because it's gotten the Yawn off, freaking Blacephalon's been able to get a free sub. So very, very cool strats here by using pivoting momentum to grab offensive momentum and win the game in a very dominant fashion. So well played to Jacal there. I'm going to show one more replay because I don't want to be too nice to Jacal, and show my good Owl teammate Vepsis deal it back to Jacal using Mandibuzz, which I think is an underrated pivoter that has significantly grown in usage in Gen 8, to get in Specs Curum here, which, as you could see, there is no answer to on this team from Jacal. So you're going to be able to see Vepsis just lead it, I guess, just saying, all right, well, you have no answer to this, and that as you can see, that's not helping. So he's just going to be able to U-turn and pivot around to his benefit here. And this is an instance where Vepsis is using offensive momentum to get in something like Curum, which you'll see a little bit later, but is also using it maybe to get in Suicune to be able to tank a hit from, Crustle. But yeah, this is sort of another example of gradual chip that's happening through the constant U-turn. Now Crustle has lost 22%, which is relatively significant. Vepsis is able to also get this residual chip off through Rocky Helmet. Yeah, Rocky Helmet, Granbull, I believe. So this is just another way where he's pivoting around. He's using hard switching actually in a more offensive way through Rocky Helmet and things like that. But as you'll see here, he's able to, and like Jacal's doing pretty well here too. Like he's able to pivot on things like Zero Aura and such. But I think here's a perfect example where Vepsis actually predicts the Zapdos to go for U-turn, since it's done it like 3 times at this point in the game. Go for U-turn in front of this Crustle, and then once again go back into Suicune, and double into Curum this turn actually, which gets really lucky for Vepsis because Rock Wrecker. But anyway, maybe that wasn't too good of a play on Vepsis's part. But the bigger point is he's able to glare, and all this stuff happens. He's able to get the Leaf Storm off here, but eventually it's still going to result in getting Curum some kills. So maybe this wasn't the best example in terms of like pivoting to get offensive momentum. I just didn't want to be too nice to Jacal and show him get, you know, beat by my owl teammate. But, you know, was it U-turn here? There you go. That's an example right there. U-turn to get offensive momentum into cure him. Jacal is no switch in. Something has to die. So exact same situation here, where, you know, Nidoqueen comes in, has to go over Earth Power, and even though Manabuzz just dies, Kyurem's able to come in again for offensive momentum. So I guess this was just more of a momentum tutorial, I guess, but in general, this is really good because the threat of U-turn and using U-turn a couple times allowed Kyurem to come in, allowed Suicune to come in, then just sort of get residual chip over time. So those are my examples. I was going to show this replay for how to work around teleport. Maybe we'll save that for another day. So we'll stick with that. But for now, that is things on teleport momentum and pivoting momentum. Hopefully that was useful to show a couple examples of some well-played Draft League battles that use that to their advantage. And yeah, let me know if you have any thoughts, if you want to add on to anything in this conversation. You know, feel free to do so. And I'll see you all next time.